The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to Speaking with the Senator. I'm Senator Kevin Avard, and we appreciate you tuning in today. Today I have a guest, State Representative Carol McGuire, and I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Senator.
Carol's, you're my chairman, my chairperson, chairwoman, chair of the jail car at the Capitol. And when you say jail car, when I say jail car, people have no idea.
It's the most important obscure committee in the state.
That's true.
Exactly, you serve on it. So it's
now a little description. What is jail car? What do we do in jail car?
Well, we have a lot of agencies that make rules that people have to follow because the laws are not detailed enough. Mm-hmm. In some cases, this is because we don't want to get involved. In some cases, it's because there's things that we hadn't thought of that need to be addressed, like how to hold a hearing or whatever.
Right.
So, unlike in Washington, when an agency comes up with rules, it's not automatically a law. They have to run it by the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, commonly known as JLCAR, and we make sure that it doesn't violate the law or have more than the agency's authorized to do, like extra fees or extra requirements to do something.
So, in other words, we make a law, and the executive branch has to make a rule to comply with the law.
Exactly.
And sometimes they take a little bit of extra liberty, maybe an extra fee, an extra fine, an extra jot and tittle on the law, yes. and that doesn't represent what the people wanted or the people's representative wanted. So you're the watch guard.
Yes, the whole committee is watch guards. It's a very amicable committee, fortunately. There's 5 representatives, 5 senators, and 5 alternates. And so we meet twice a month, or thereabouts, and review what rules are coming up. Like this past, last week, we had the opioid prescribing rules, and we sent those back for rework, and we'll be having them again on the 20th.
And we've had a number of agencies that have been working on emergency rules, whether it's education or I don't know if it's safety.
Safety and HHS, yes.
And when people are up against that, are these rules enforceable if they're on emergency rules?
Yes, emergency rules are enforceable. Okay. However, expired rules are not enforceable. That's something that I managed to get through last session, that once the rule is expired, it cannot be enforced. Now, the law still applies, so if the law says that you have to have a license, you have to have a license. But if it's the rule that says you have to have these qualifications to get a license,
right.
You have a case against it.
Yeah. Now, you've served on this a couple of terms?
This is my 3rd term on that committee.
That's why you're the chairwoman.
That's why I'm the chair, yes. I've survived.
Yeah, and actually, just kudos to you. You've done a very good job, and I do like the fact that you hold a good hearing. You don't seem to take fools lightly, and I appreciate that. It's kind of in the spirit of John Reagan, actually.
He's inspired me.
Yeah, because these things can be dragged on, and you can be bullied around, and that really just does everybody a disservice.
Yeah, in most cases, there's only a small group of people who are concerned about one particular piece of the rule, and they shouldn't be monopolizing the whole committee while they're fighting out whether it's shall or will this or whatever.
Right.
The last year or two, we've been sending a lot more of the agencies back to say, why don't you work on this a little bit and bring us something better?
Right.
Which saves us everyone a lot of trouble, because the agency will think about it a little harder, and they've got the public comments or our comments and concerns to improve the rules.
So is this your third term as a rep?
Fourth.
Fourth term, and now your husband also, Dan McGuire, has been, this is fourth term as well?
This is his third term, but
Third.
He's not running for re-election.
He's not?
He's
Oh.
done 3 state budgets, and he thinks he's done his part.
I actually submitted his marriage, was on equal merit or
Community property.
community property, and that nobody wanted to work on it, so it kind of fell flat, but I'm all willing to reintroduce it again. That's well thought out legislation. He's he served the state very well. So
Well, thank you. I'll let him know.
yeah, he has. And one of the things that I gave you kudos one time at a meeting that we had, because you had this whole crowd of people that were well, they weren't exactly in favor of our legislation of loosening or even getting rid of certain licenses.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have an entire stadium, if you will, or the entire reps hall there with one purpose, and that is to go against the grain, it takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, that was the Bobcat rules, as I understand it. And it was kind of a foregone conclusion, because Fish and Game has an awful lot of authority to set hunting seasons, what you're going to hunt and when. I mean, they're keeping an eye on the number of moose permits and stuff like that. So when they wanted to do a bobcat permit, well, it's probably within their authority, but I'm sure it's within their authority. The trouble is that there's a whole lot of people that are violently opposed to trapping as opposed to hunting,
Right.
and they all showed up.
They certainly did. It did actually strike me kind of awkward. I mean, who wants to get a bobcat? Or somebody does. I understand it's but it's like, okay, really? Are you going to eat it? Or is it the
Probably
pelt?
not.
Yeah. But anyway, it takes courage to stand up in front of a whole reps hall with people, either that or licensing of haircuts or.
That was the other time I had a hearing in
Yeah.
Repsol, was licensing.
And it does take courage, and you're there, and you're just trying to make life simpler for other people and to follow the rules. And so sometimes people don't understand what you're actually doing. And when you're under fire like that, you can stand up and take the heat. That's important.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it happens to a lot of people that are in leadership, and we see that. And my heart goes out to them, even if I don't agree with them sometimes. Sometimes they don't get a fair shake, and I think that's it's irresponsible, especially when people have not done their homework. So now you're running again,
Yes.
and there's a rumor around that you might be running for a speaker.
I am, actually. I've just filed a committee to spend money. I'm not too worried about raising it, but I have to have report to any spending.
Now with the speaker, I mean, last time there was a lot of rancor. There was a lot of back and forth, and 1 or 2 votes. How do you see this race coming out? How do you see this working?
That's
out?
something that I'm very concerned with. Our current speaker essentially made a deal with the devil, and he and a small group of representatives, I don't know why, I won't speculate because I can't think of too many good reasons, they made a deal with the Democrats to support him for speaker rather than the caucus choice. And therefore, you ended up with the people that in the Republican House members who had supported Bill O'Brien were essentially ignored, kicked out, and told, don't bother us, we're going to work with the Democrats instead. And so the Republicans were split. There was a lot of bad feeling all around. Quite a few people behaved badly. And we ended up with a case where a lot of things that happened were not what the majority of the Republicans would have wanted. And so it's been a very tough year, tough session. It felt worse this time than the previous session when Republicans were in the minority, not by very much. And in fact, I've been in for 2 terms in the minority and 2 in the majority. And this is the first time that the Republicans have been scattered all over the place and fighting among themselves.
There seems to be a sense of disenfranchisement with, what are we doing up here? I'm on the Senate side, so I wasn't
Slightly
engaged.
distanced.
Slightly distanced, there is, but, I have a lot of friends in the House, and I maintain those friends because they still, I sat with them, and I have a great deal of respect for many of them. So we don't like to hear of this going back and forth, back and forth. There's new session coming up. You're running.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think you can bring people together?
Partly it's by agreeing to support the caucus choice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only candidate so far that is actually committed to supporting the caucus choice. I'm not going to run a splinter movement or make deals. And also, I've been there for 8 years. I know a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of people all across the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to agree with somebody on very many issues in order to work closely with them to get one of your issues through.
Right.
And so that helps. I'm also got the experience of being a committee chair, and Jill Carr, of course, has been very enlightening. I've also been the chair of the House Republican Alliance for 4 years now and worked on reviewing legislation and analyzing it and making recommendations. So that's something that you need to do to get the policies right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping to get enough people that don't want to be disenfranchised or have stuck with infighting. And there are a lot of things we can do that I would like to see us do in this coming session.
Now on jail car, I noticed that the Representative Schmidt, you and him have a good rapport. You actually with everybody on the committee, and it is very polite, and you know how to work across the aisle. So you're also going to be the speaker of the Democrats as well, should we retain the majority. What do you envision? How does that work?
How does that work? Well, first you have to be respectful of people. You have to listen to them. You don't have to do what they want all the time. In fact, you can't. You can't ever please everybody.
Right.
But you need to listen to them and find out what's really important. And getting the respect and fair treatment goes a long way to making people feel better. Because even if you disagree on policy, you can work on one of the many, many nonpartisan things we have. You can at least feel that your positions are understood and respected, which is much more important than getting everybody to agree to them.
Right.
So, you never get everybody to agree. With 400 members, I can still remember one time when we were doing, I think it was the state dog, and so someone had made their speeches, and we were going to, the Speaker Norelli was going to call for a vote, and one of the sponsors got up and said, "Oh no, I want a division vote so we can see it's unanimous," which convinced me and probably another 50 people to vote against the state dog, just to make sure it's not unanimous.
Right. Right. And so building kind of coalitions too is something that you end up doing. I notice as a senator, I do that more often than as a state rep. But when you're speaker, you have to engage in many kind of coalitions and building bridges, which otherwise, I mean, it can
be. A lot of it's personality driven. Right. I think personal issues with Bill O'Brien were at a large part of the decision not to support him for Speaker. But I don't have as many people who hate me personally as Bill did, fortunately. Right. But I do have, like I said, connections throughout the House on all sorts of different things, from meat inspection to pellet stoves.
I've never heard one ill comment about you as a rep and as a senator.
Well, thank you.
Or Representative McGuire and your husband, and he's both of you been articulate, but I've admired Dan. Well thought out. Yes. And when he gets up there, he has his facts, and I'm sorry that he's not going to be there.
Well, he needs to take some time off. He may come back later. You never know. But this time we've got a number of business prospects that he wants to get more involved with.
Are you engaged with the public at all in this campaign? Are you knocking doors or seeing people?
I'm running for re-election,
Right.
but most of my re-election is either I've already done some things. I write weekly letters to our local newspaper, which has been a marvelous source for me because I've been doing it. It's my first term. I started writing about what was going on, and I've kept it up because so many people appreciate knowing what's going on in the State House.
Right.
Particularly the less important things. I mean, the budget gets discussed, but who knows about our license plate reader bill or the meat inspections? Anything else I'm working on.
It's an interesting public service. And the reason I was asking is because I'm just kind of wondering what you're hearing back from the voters, what some of their main concerns are. I'm hearing mostly healthcare. What are we going to do with the Medicaid expansion? Who's going to pay for it? The opioid is definitely a situation where people are very concerned. We're going to have people on the show a little bit talking about how they survived, and they're in recovery. So,
I'm in a district of 3 small towns.
Yeah.
So some of the issues we see, I mean, healthcare is of concern, but and the cost thereof. I haven't gotten very many comments or questions about Medicaid expansion. There are concerns about how the state is operating. The Liquor Commission I'm dealing with a couple of issues with the Liquor Commission for constituents. Licensing is always fun when you're not quite there.
Yeah.
And the Department of Transportation, whether they're working on our roads, or they're going to finally fix Main Street in Pittsfield, that sort of thing. And of course, we have a large number of state employees and former state employees, so retiree health care and the pension system are very much a concern to a lot of constituents.
And those are going to be issues that
They're not going to go away.
They are not going to go away. And those are the issues where you're going to have to really do some brainstorming to make sure they're taken care of, and at the same time that we're putting money away for it, the whole 9 yards. There's a lot of concern about that. So it's Pittsfield, Epsom, and Chichester?
Allenstown.
Allenstown.
It's not quite as closely related as the others, but it's the only way the numbers would work.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
We tried to gerrymander it in 10 after the census,
Yeah.
but they're just, the
Allenstown.
way the numbers work, that's what it is.
That's interesting. We have, I think Keith Amon is from New Boston, and he's also representing Hollis. How does that work?
The numbers have to work out. Yeah, with floterials,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I'm in the floterial, and so I represent 3 towns, and then there's 2 representatives from Epsom and Pittsfield and 1 from Allenstown. And I understand that if 12 people had moved from Epsom to Pittsfield just before the census, we would have had 1 rep from each town and 1 in the floterial. But
Wow.
the thing is that the federal requirements for one man, 1 vote are based on a federal congressional district, which is 500,000 people. It's pretty easy to come within 500,000 people. But when you're talking a 3,300 person district that can't cross town lines, that can't split towns, that can't cross county lines, you're very restrictive. We're in a corner of Merrimack County, and like I said, there's exactly 2 choices. And this one has smaller districts, so that's what we went with.
I remember everybody going back and forth. I remember it was 2010 through 12 when we did this.
Right after the census.
And there was just a lot of going back and forth between the House and the Senate, and it was just, wow, this was a big deal. And it looks kind of weird.
Well, the Senate districts are more open to political gerrymandering, but not the congressional districts are much more so.
Right.
And so the whole point that was done, the House had slightly different goals than the Senate. So we voted for whatever the Senate wanted. That's polite. And
Thank you. But I was the rep back then.
You were a rep that time, yeah. And the Executive Council and congressional districts, that was more fun because you've got a lot more flexibility in those districts.
So this is definitely an interesting year, isn't it?
Yes, it's as in the Chinese curse, you know.
We were talking a little bit off camera, and I'm just telling people, if some of our choices are very interesting, but the best thing that we can do is definitely vote strong locally.
My suggestion is when you go to vote, and please do, it's November 8th, go there and start at the bottom. Your vote will matter a lot more for sheriff or county attorney.
Yeah.
And you probably know those people better. They're probably more reputable and nicer. And so just keep going until you get disgusted.
Yeah.
You'll do a lot more good than if you start at the top and went on until you got disgusted.
Exactly. And it's so interesting. I think it's Victoria Sullivan. I think she won by 2 or 3 votes. Representative Eric Eastman won. He's in Ward 1 here in Nashua. He won, I think, by 9 or 10. So every vote does count. And we were very successful, both the House and the Senate, to reduce taxes here in New Hampshire. I mean, that's one of the good things we did. I mean, even if it's a minute amount.
It shows the right intentions at least.
Yeah, hey, we're open for business, and maybe we can work on that a little bit more, but we need to relieve the taxpayers. Are there some top goals as
well, one goal is to take a good hard look at the education funding. The state share of it is, first you give enough to every town, and then you make your tweaks and adjustments. And we've been fighting it in the courts as well as in the legislature for 20 years or thereabouts. And so it's perfectly honestly, it looks like a real mess. And we just lost a court decision with Dover because
I think a lot of people knew that was going to happen anyway.
Well, it was kind of surprising that they bothered because they were complaining that they didn't get enough because of the limits of stabilization. Well, that's already, we listened to them, and in the current budget, it goes away. So they're fighting for 1 year's worth. But we'll have to look at it. The fast-growing towns were shortchanged, and the places with shrinking population got more than they should.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of them.
I think Nashua was one of them, wasn't it?
Probably. I think the biggest one was Manchester, which besides its own issues, ended up that Bedford left, took its high school students out. Hooksett and Candia are dealing with other places to send their high schoolers. And so their school population has dropped pretty dramatically just because of that. And so, but they're getting a lot of stabilization grants because we didn't adjust it for the massive changes in population.
Do you foresee more changes coming?
Well, we have to do something.
Yeah.
We can't just tell the towns, okay, you're all set, take care of your school for yourself. Whether we would like to or not, that's not going to be politically possible.
Right.
So we've got to deal with the education funding. I hope we can do something constructive about the pension system. We need to address retiree health care because, that's in even worse shape than pensions because at least we've put aside money for the pensions. Not enough, but we've put it aside. For retiree health care, we are paying as we go. And the number of retirees, state retirees, is increasing because people are getting older. They're still retiring fairly young, and they're living longer. I think there's, a dozen over 100?
Good for them.
Good for them, yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want anyone to die earlier than they need to, but it's something that is facing us, yes.
And that never is an easy conversation.
Never.
And so, bringing people to the table is a good positive attitude will help.
And you need a lot of people to get involved because with the retirees, you've got the people that worked for the state for 40 years, starting in the 60s and 70s, and took lower pay in order to get the benefits.
Promises were made.
Promises were made. And then you have the people that decided when they were 40 to work for the state for 10 years so they'd get free health care for life. And some people did that, which was legal, but not something the system was designed to pay for.
They did not see this coming.
No,
They
we didn't see it coming.
None of us saw this coming, and I remember that was a huge topic of discussion, and there was a lot of rancor going back and forth on that.
Both
And
sides, yeah.
So now
I'm getting it from both sides
Yeah.
because of all the retirees and state employees that live in my district.
So you're going to be the peacemaker and problem solver, which
I
is
certainly hope so, or at least get the right parties at the table and
Yeah.
lock the door so they can't escape until they agree.
Yeah, well, you certainly have the credentials to step up to the plate, and we appreciate you coming on the show to talk about it. How can people get in touch with you if they want to talk to you a little bit more as far as state reps
Well,
or can-
you can go to the state website and find under my ID, you can find my home phone and my personal email, which I do answer both of them. I don't recommend my cell phone because it doesn't work at home, but I do have voicemail.
Do you not have coverage in your area? Or?
Oh, we do.
Yeah.
It worked great outside on the front porch.
Okay.
It's inside the house that's the problem.
That's funny. Yeah.
It's a concrete house, so it's
Okay.
got a lot of rebar. So but yes, they can call, they can send an email.
Okay.
I've been putting that information in my weekly letter to the editor, and I've been very impressed because my constituents, only contact me when it's important.
And they know they can. So
Then they can.
That's great. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. And thank you for watching Speaking with the Senator. I'm Kevin Navard, your state senator here in District 12. I represent Ward 1, 2, and 5 in Nashua. So if you have any questions, if you want to come on the show, contact me at some point. Until next week, thanks for watching.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.